This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Well, welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the studio on the ranch in northern Colorado. The weather so far has been fantastic for the last couple of weeks. A little warm, but nothing to complain about. Beautiful view of the Rocky Mountains here from the ranch. Yes, that picture behind me, if you're watching the live stream or you're watching this later on YouTube, is actually a view from the ranch here in Colorado. It actually is not a live picture. The studio has a 35-foot by 12-foot green screen, so that image is actually coming in via the green screen. Mainly because I don't shoot the image out through the glass windows because when it's sunsetting, it's very hard to shoot. So, but I do want to share with you kind of the view from the lovely northern Colorado. We are up near Rocky Mountain National Park, and it has been, like I said, the weather has been great. We're in the heat of the summer now, but having a great summer so far. Hope you're having a great summer, and hope you're staying safe. Today's show is we're gonna kind of I don't know what you want to call it, circle back around over the last, I don't know, half dozen shows. Probably the ones that I do that are just me, not with guests. I've been sharing different elements of of innovation and how to change your thinking styles and different pieces and elements. Today's show is I want to take a step back and bring this all back together. Now, some of you may say, hey, what you're going to cover today, I've covered in the past, and I've covered portions of it. But my goal is to give you a kind of a structure. I'm sharing with you the exact structure, the exact construct that I use, and I've used it with all of my teams over many years, both at HP and Cable Labs, where I'm the CEO now at, to organize the work around innovation and how do we think through all of those component pieces. And so, with that, let's hop in and talk about, what are these things? So, the thing I want to talk about today is what I call the innovation framework. You need to have a framework. Now, framework is really, think of it as a scalable platform. It's really the components that you have to really be able to empower your organization, empower your team to be highly successful when it comes to innovation. You've got to have a certain set of these components. If you don't have them, then you're just basically, fooling yourselves. It's just not going to work. Now, what's the difference between a framework and an innovation process? So, again, the framework is it can be a construct that's common across multiple organizations, that all organizations adopt or all organizations understand that they need to have these components together. What you build on top of your framework is your process, the process that you're using to actually do each of the individual elements, right? Now, I'm not a big process guy, and there's a lot of innovation consultants out there that will tell you, oh, follow my magic 10-step process and you will solve all your innovation process. We've run into large organizations, small organizations, government agencies that have paid millions and millions of dollars out to consultants to, quote, define their process. And they come in with these big notebooks or big training programs that go on for multiple years. And the end result is they don't work. Why? Because while the framework can be generic, you need to have these elements to make an innovation framework. The processes that you put on top of them have to be tailored to you. They don't work. I've had in the past organizations, and in fact, if you want to read about it, there's a whole chapter in my book about what happened with Kroger. Kroger tried to pick up the process that I used at HP. They asked if they could. I said yes. The process that I deployed at HP. There's case studies. You can go to Stanford Business School, Harvard Business School teaches the processes that I created at HP as part of their MBA case study program. If you pick that up and try to apply it, you are not going to be successful. They have to be tailored to you. You just can't take a generic process and apply it because you have different needs, you have different culture, you have different language, you've got different resource structures. You have to take all that into account to create the process, create your process. I'm not talking about process today. What I want to talk about today is the framework. What are those elements? So, what are the elements needed in an innovation framework? What are those elements that you need to have? So, let me ask you a question. What elements do you think need to be in an innovation framework? Think about it. What elements? Come on. I'll wait. What are they? Okay. I know some of you out there yelled out brainstorming, right? Brainstorming needs to be one of the elements. And however, I get what you were intending to say, but let me clarify because language is important, right? And besides, I would put brainstorming into a category of a process, right? Because brainstorming is a very specific method of doing what? Of generating ideas. So it's not about brainstorming, it's what I would call ideation. Ideation is the process of generating ideas. There are a lot of different ways to do that. You can do that with brainstorming. You can do that with, oh, I don't know, electronic suggestion boxes, right? So instead of using the term brainstorming, that's a very specific process, and brainstorming may work for you, and you may want to tailor brainstorming to work better within your organization, right? But ideation is the framework element. You need an element of your innovation framework is about idea generation, and that's the definition of ideation. So we have ideation. What are some of the other elements that need to be in an innovation framework? Come on, what do you think about? Well, execution, right? And you probably are already geared up to hear me give my quote once again. And what is that quote? Ideas without execution is a hobby. I don't know about you. I'm not in the hobby business. Putting ideas in an idea notebook, and look, I got crates of notebooks here in the studio, going back, 40 years of my career, with all kinds of ideas in them. Ideas without execution is a hobby. You have to execute. You need to have execution. So do you think ideation and execution and that's it? That's all you need in the framework? What else? What are other elements that you believe should be in in an innovation framework? Right? Now, there's lots of different things that you may be thinking about, but I've got two questions I really want to challenge you to think about and really for you to try to answer. So the first one is okay, if I'm going to create an innovation framework, where do I look for ideas? What element should I be putting into the framework, and where do you look for your ideas? Now, some people believe that the ideas should come from, oh, I don't know, you slip on the, bar of soap in the bathtub, you bang your head, you jump up, eureka, right? Never's worked for me, right? So where do you go look for ideas? Where do you source ideas? Where do you source the things, the sparks that say, hey, we need to go, do that? Is it from customers? Customers can be a good source of those, right? I, however, have a different opinion that customers in many cases may not be the best source of ideas. But as part of your innovation framework, you need to have some mechanism of where do you look for the ideas? Do you wait for someone to send a letter? Do you wait for someone? Is your sourcing of your ideas purely coming from, oh, I don't know, people calling into the call center to complain? but where do you look for ideas? Where do you get that spark to really generate those first set of ideas? That's question one. Question two, how do you select the right ideas to work on? How do you select the best ideas to work on? Right? If you do a brainstorming session, you got 300-400 ideas. How do you pick the best one? At HP, we would do 3,500 to 4,000 unique ideas every year, and you got to filter those. You can't do 4,000 new products a year. How do you select them? How do you select them? So for me, I want you to think about what are those elements needed for an innovation framework. We've identified two: ideation, execution. What are some of the other pieces? We're going to cover that right after this commercial break. Well, welcome back to Q Innovations. Before we jump back into the content, one thing I wanted to make you aware of: all of the content that we cover in today's show, and actually content that we've covered where I've used slides or I've shared diagrams on the live stream, or you're seeing this on the YouTube video. Even if you're listening on the podcast or the radio, you can get all of that material by hopping over to killerinnovations.com/download. Killerinnovations.com/download, or just go over to killerinnovations.com, go up to the top menu, you'll see the download, hit it, put in your email address, and everything we've covered on this show, and including materials that have been in shows in the past. You can get all of that at one shot. You can download it, give us your email address, we'll send it to you, we'll give you the links, you can download all of that content that you would want. So hop on over to that and check that out. So again, innovation framework. Remember, the innovation framework is a scalable platform created to harness the creative talents of your team. It is about giving your team a framework, a structure to think about innovation. Your processes are going to be unique, but the framework gives you and your team a mental model and a language. How you do it may be different, but you need to have a mental model, a framework for conversations, for motivation, for people to kind of understand the thinking, and it establishes a language. So, again, the question that I asked you was what? What are the required elements needed in an innovation framework? So, we're actually going to walk through the 4 required elements needed in an innovation framework. These are the 4 that are required, right? If you don't have these, you're fooling yourself. You don't have an effective innovation approach. Now, again, all the processes and steps are different, but you have to have these 4 elements. So, what's the first element? First element I refer to is focus. Focus. Focus defines and researches the opportunity or problem area that you're going to focus and point the team at. This is where you're going to point your efforts, right? So there's 2 steps that you have to do as part of focus. One, you have to investigate a focus area, right? You have to define kind of, the area that is of challenge or of interest. You're not quite sure if there's a problem in it yet, but you got to define the area, right? So what I do every year with my teams is I actually create a list of 4 to 6 areas of focus, things that we want to be working on. These could be things about the future transitions of technologies or new technology areas that we think could be interesting. It could be changing demographics. It could be changing political landscape with regulators if I'm in a regulated industry, but you have to define kind of the focus areas, because that then kind of points your entire organization to say, these are the priority areas that we want to think about. Now you have to define the problem. What's the problem or the opportunities in each of those areas? And you go through a process just like you would do any others where you're generating ideas. So let's just use brainstorming as an example. You would brainstorm to identify the problems. And I talk about that in a previous show on problem statements. So if you haven't seen that show, go back, listen to that show. That's about defining the problem statement, which is part of focus. So once you've kind of investigated the area, your next challenge is create a problem statement. And a problem statement is something that you word in such a way that that drives people to create the solution. Problem statements are hard. Opportunity statements are hard. Real quick, what's the difference between a problem statement and an opportunity statement? A problem statement is defining it such that there's somebody or something that has a problem and you're trying to solve it. An opportunity statement is like a problem statement, but it's more of a you're trying to solve an unmet need or you're trying to create something totally new. The customer doesn't identify the problem, but you think it's a future opportunity. So that's the difference. Once you've identified the problem or opportunity statement, that is the deliverable, the output of the focus element of your innovation framework is the problem statement. And for instance, the poster child for problem statement is the John F. Kennedy problem statement for putting the man on the moon. When JFK kind of challenged the citizens of the United States and really the citizens of the world with a BHAG or a challenge statement to put a man on the moon. What was that statement? Well, the statement said, before the end of the decade, we will put a man on the moon and return them home safely. 19 words. That's all that's in that statement is 19 words. 19 words that resulted in hundreds of thousands of people and billions of dollars to successfully put Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon and bring them home safely. But do you think that was just whipped out in 30 seconds before you ran a brainstorming session? No. Creating well-crafted, well-worded, clear problem statements aligned an entire country and aligned the world around this goal. You can do the same, but you have to spend the time. Most innovation frameworks do not have this focus area. It is absolutely critical. The better you are at defining this focus area and defining the problem and opportunity statements and spending the time, not only will you increase the quantity of your ideas in your pipeline, but you will radically increase the quality of the ideas. Next is ideation. Based on your focus, create a funnel of ideas that address the opportunity and problem. This is where you're going to generate, your ideas. Step one is both individual and team ideation. However you want to do it, brainstorming, suggestion box, customer surveys, whatever it is. What I have found is when you do both individual and team and you combine them, you actually increase the quantity of your ideas by about 30%. Step two of ideation is grouping the ideas. Take all those ideas, whether you do it on Post-it notes, you use Jamboard, if you've watched my previous show on how to do virtual brainstorming, given the COVID-19 experience, go check that out. But you group them, you bring them together, you find those overlaps, and so you can create these groups or chunks. But this is where you're generating the ideas that go into your funnel. However, whatever process you want to use, this is where you're going to generate that funnel. And the key here is you want to capture and create a funnel of every one of those ideas. Nothing gets thrown away. You keep it all. You keep it because you may recycle back through and take advantage of that. So we've talked about two of those elements for the framework. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. Let's continue our conversation on what are those required elements of an innovation framework. And don't forget, hop on over to killerinnovations.com/download, and you can get a copy of all of the slides, not only for this show, but for all of the past shows where we've had support material. So just hop over to killerinnovations.com/download and check that out. Okay, so let's talk about what are the required elements needed in an innovation framework. We've covered two. What were they? We talked about focus and we've talked about ideation. So, what are other elements that are required elements needed for an innovation framework? Well, the next one we're going to talk about is ranking. This is the one element that I have found that 99% of all the innovation frameworks that are out there do not include. They do not include ranking. So the driver for ranking is we use a ranking approach to identify the best ideas. And it's based on some criteria. It's not based on because it's a pet project of some executive or whatever. Now, think about it. Think about the last time, I don't know, you did a brainstorming session, right? So you get 10 of your best and brightest people, you put them into the room, and let's just say, every one of them comes up with 20 post-it notes with one idea per post-it note. You got 200 ideas. What's the best idea? What happened in the past? What happened in the past, I'm going to bet, is somebody on your team said, "Oh, I'll type up all those ideas." You probably put them on some kind of a flip chart, or you wrote them on a whiteboard, and someone snaps a picture, and someone goes back to the desk and dutifully types up all those ideas, and then sends the email out. What happened? Be honest. What happened? Nothing. Nada. Why? Because no one knows. What do you do with 200 ideas, right? I may have my pet project. You may have your pet project. 200 ideas, totally unmanageable. What I'm talking about here is creating a process, creating a criteria to identify not just okay ideas or kind of these are the okay ideas, these are the, no, what you want is you want a ranked list so that you can take the top 2 or 3 ideas, right? So not, out of 200 ideas, the top 10% are 20. Those are still 20 ideas. Those are still too many. You need to get down to 2 or 3 ideas. So how do you get down to that? You use wisdom of the crowd. Leverage the people that you have. So in the previous section, we talked about ideation and about grouping. In the grouping process, at least in my workshops, people share kind of a little bit of background, why they wrote this idea out, why they think it's good. So now your entire team now has heard that and kind of has a perspective, right? Now you need to rank, and you need to trust the team. So we do, or the way I teach it is we teach a 2-stage ranking process. The first is what we call wow or dot ranking. Wow meaning like, holy Toledo, I think this is a really great idea. And the way we do it is we give everybody 5 dots. And these are those little sticky dots, right? So you're given 5 dots, I'm given 5 dots, so-and-so's given 5 dots. Then everybody walks up to this list of all these ideas. They're typically on post-it notes or on a screen if you're using something like a Jamboard tool or something like that. And you can put all of your 5 dots on one idea, or you can spread your dots around. So everybody's voting with the dots. When everybody's done, you just simply count up the dots, and you kind of identify maybe the top 5 or top 10 ideas. So that's kind of a first kind of pre-sorting of trying to get the 200 ideas down to something that's reasonable. Then you have your criteria ranking. Now, criteria vary by organization. Criteria that I used at HP as an example was 5 questions. And each question scored on a 0 to 5. So the top score I could give an idea was 25 points. First question, will this change the customer's experience? Second question, will this change the competitive positioning of the company or the product in the marketplace? Third question was, will this change the economics of the industry? If I can't answer yes to one of those 3, then why am I even thinking about doing this? Doesn't even bubble up to should it even be considered. So if I can answer a strong yes to one of those 3, then the next 2 questions. One is do I have a contribution to make? Now at HP, 47,000 engineers, $4 billion. of R&D spend, 350, 400 researchers in HP labs. Lots of resources to do on a project could go into oil exploration. No expertise to contribute. Does this fit with your capabilities? Score that 0 to 5. And then the last question is will there be enough economic return on this? Will this generate sufficient margin to contribute to the success of the overall business? Not looking for a spreadsheet. This is purely gut. Score that 0 to 5. I score all the, let's say, 10 ideas. Everybody else on the team scores 10 ideas. You total them up and you rank them. What you will find is the top 2 to 3% of the ideas are at the top of the list. Happens every time. Trust me, this works. You get the top 2 to 3% of the ideas, there's a gap in the score, and then there's the rest of the ideas. So now you've got down to, that 2, 3, 4 ideas that are really highly scored and that everybody's excited about. The real benefit here is the team that did the ideation should be the same team that does the ranking. And in fact, I will tell you to do the ranking in the exact same session. Don't let people walk away, go away, do it, do it by email, whatever. Do it in the room. Do it in the process. So now you've got this ranked list of ideas. And now when people leave the room, it's not like, hey, yeah, we did a good session. We came up with 200 ideas. People leave the room energized. They're like, holy smokes, we've got 3 just killer ideas that this thing is just going to transform us. No way we can't lose. We're really excited about this. And now you're off to getting leadership to back the idea, right? So ranking, absolutely critical. Has to be an element. However you want to do your ranking, but you need to come up with a ranking approach. And then the fourth element that's needed in an innovation framework, and that is execution. You have to drive execution. Ideas without execution is a hobby, and I'm not in the hobby business, right? Now, execution is very specific to an organization. Do you have a methodology for change management, for rolling out new products or new services? Do you have supply chain and manufacturing facilities, right? You have to tailor this very, very specifically to your organization. But there's 2 steps that really need to happen. One is you need to have a test and experimentation. How do you do something quick and dirty and get it out in front of people to validate that the problem exists, that the solution you're thinking about solves the problem, and that whoever is going to transfer time, money, or whatever to get access to your idea, do they find it valuable enough? Is the value that you're going to receive more than what it's going to take for you to deliver that capability? Right? So you got to test. You have to have some form of experimentation. And you have to have an experimentation culture. You have to be willing and have methodologies to do lots of experiments and do them very quickly and get that feedback and then see what happens. And then the second element is you have to launch. You got to get an MVP, minimal viable product. You don't wait until you get the perfect product. What does a minimal viable product look like in getting that into customers' hands? So it's not a kludge, it's real product, it's real capabilities, but it's just the core set of capabilities and features that you can then go in and test and validate. So you have to do the experimentation. You got to be willing to throw things out that aren't working. You got to tweak the experiment, use the feedback, loop that very, very quickly, and then you got to launch. You got to do something. You got to get in the marketplace. You got to generate revenue. So execution, absolutely important, but you got to break it down into these 2 steps or activities. Now, how you do it, the actual processes you use, again, are very, very specific to your organization. Do not try to come in with an innovation execution model, because the innovation antibodies inside your organization will come out in droves. And again, this is where Kroger ran into some challenges when they just tried to pick up the HP process and drop it in. And then I spent a lot of time in Cincinnati with that team, and we tweaked it, and they came up with something, and they were the ones that really taught me how to adapt it so it works within their model, and it turned into being a great success. Don't go anywhere. We got more to cover. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's wrap up this whole concept of what are the four required elements of an innovation framework. Now, we've been talking about it in the constructs of what are the individual pieces, but there are fundamentally four required elements that you must have in an innovation framework. And that is what I refer to as the FIRE framework. The FIRE framework focuses on these areas. One is focus, the F in FIRE, the ideation, the I in FIRE, the ranking, the R in FIRE, and E, the execution. When you bring this all together, focus, ideation, ranking, and execution, you now have all of the elements, all of the key components needed to be effective in your innovation activities. Now, each of these requires a process. And as I've said before, the processes need to be unique to your organization. How do you do things today that you can adapt to this? What language do you need to use to make sure that you don't elicit a response from the innovation antibodies? So, again, focus, ideation, ranking, and execution. These four elements are absolutely, you got to have them. If you don't have them, you're fooling yourself. You're just blowing smoke. You got to have all four of these elements: focus, ideation, ranking, and execution. Now, as I've said before, and I'll say it here again, this diagram, all the slides and materials for this show and past shows is available for free download over at Killer Innovations. So you can just go to killerinnovations.com/download, put in your email address. We'll send you an email because there's a lot of materials. We have everything from product launch diagramming to how to run brainstorming sessions to a whole plethora of supplemental material that we've shared on the show over its many, many years. You'll get one email with all of that on it. So if you want this graphic, you can try to capture it on the screen or whatever you want to do, but you can get the diagram by just hopping over to killerinnovations.com/download and free of charge, and just so it makes it easier for you to get it, to understand it. Now, this framework that we talk about FIRE, this is the FIRE framework that's used literally by thousands and thousands of organizations around the world. This is the framework I teach. This is the framework that I used, and it was, you know, an early version of it I created prior to going to be the CTO at HP. It's one that was used at HP. This is the one that's written about both in the Harvard Business case study and at the Stanford Graduate School Business case study. So if you want to, you can hop over to Harvard or Stanford, look it up. You can just search for Phil McKinney on both sites, and the case study will pop up. There've been lots of articles written about this. My book talks about this, but fundamentally, with this structure, you give a framework, you give a mental model to your team about how they should think about innovation. Now, frameworks are only one piece of it. You also have to teach, fundamental skills. You have to show people the mindset of innovation. And that is all part of what we refer to as box think. So the FIRE framework is part of box think, but box think is much more encompassing. It is about the mindset. It's about the framework. It's about how to change perspectives, how to teach yourself to look with fresh eyes, how to look at opportunities from inside the box, meaning constraints within the organization, how to look at opportunities from outside the box. So if you're interested in box think, this has been in some more recent previous shows. You can go back over to killerinnovations.com. You could actually just go up to the search bar, put in box think, and it'll point you to the show, and you can check that out. If you're specifically interested in the FIRE framework, and more specifically around ideation and ranking and how we do that, we actually have a workshop that we teach that is called the Disruptive Ideation Workshop. It's a 1 day, or in some cases, a 1.5 day workshop. This is the workshop we've done with small businesses, large globals, government agencies, Department of Defense, etc. And this is a unique workshop in the fact that what you can get is not only learning the focus, ideation, and ranking processes, but just as important though is that you actually do it. We do it for teams. So we go in with a problem that you want to go after. We help you work with you to craft the problem statement, and then I facilitate the ideation and the ranking activity. So you get to see exactly how I do it. You get to experience it. Your team learns it, and then you're off to the races. Then you can then replicate that inside your organization and use it for on an ongoing basis. So check that out. It's disruptiveideation.com. You can go over to that page. Gives you a lot more information. You can submit to get contacted by the team over at the Innovators Network. And either I'll teach it or one of the other people over at the Innovators Network. The Innovators Network is made up of either current or former heads of innovation at very well-known organizations on a global basis. So it's a network of innovators, not a network of consultants. This is a network of innovation leaders, people who've sat in the chair, who actually have done this. And you want to take advantage of those kinds of skills. If you're interested in staying connected, just text the word innovation to 44222. Again, text the word innovation to 44222. That's if you're in the US. If otherwise, you can drop us an email at innovation@killerinnovations.com. That will put you on the list of people within the family. You'll get the weekly newsletter, which is highlights latest thinking and activities and strategies around innovation. You can also drop me an email, phil@killerinnovations.com. Don't forget, hop on over to the blog, which is philmckinney.com, and check out what I'm latest writings over there. With that, bye-bye.